Bonjour, yin yu, and welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. That, by the way, is Chinese for to cast a brick to attract jade.
Oh, wow. The Mortal
Yes.
Kombat character. Is that how I get her? God, I've been trying to unlock her forever. You got to throw
Toss
a
a brick.
brick.
Up, down,
Weird.
down, back, high kick. That means sort of like toss an idea out there.
Okay.
Just like the sprint was tossed out there for us. Whether it has attracted any jade, I'll leave that up to you. I'm Drew Scanlon, joining me, Danny O'Dwyer. How are you, Danny?
I'm doing good. I'm enjoying the beautiful... well, I was sick for a number of weeks there, as you all know, and unfortunately it meant that the grass outside grew to insane heights. Like, it's like up to my waist almost. So I spent a large
Do you have
amount of
bamboo
today...
grass? Is it like
exactly,
fast growing?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's incredibly fertile around here. It used to all be like chicken farms and stuff. So the ground just like soaks up the water and grows crazy. So, yeah, when it gets that high, you're basically screwed. You can't like drive a mower over it, or even a riding mower would struggle. So I was just out there today. Yeah, I was out there with my napalm, just burning it down like that Far Cry level where you burned all the weed. Remember that? That was great. Sorry, wrong podcast.
Rob Zachney, have you used a flamethrower recently?
I do have one of those little hand torches for like putting a little bit of like, kissing food with a little bit of flame.
Little sear?
But the problem is they don't let you have the stuff you can just order to be like, I need a little food torch. They don't give you the shit you really want, right? Like the stuff you see in like really nice restaurants where it's like really intense hot flame.
Yeah.
They basically give you a big butane lighter. And that's just not hot enough, and it's not intense enough, so it's real disappointing. But I've used those recently.
All of Rob's meringues smell like cigarettes.
If you are new to this podcast, a very warm welcome to you. And if you are new to Formula One itself, by Jove, we've got a episode just for you. Our preseason primer assumes no prior F1 knowledge, explains how the sport works and who everybody is. So if you'd like to go back and listen to that and get up to speed. It's episode 257. Also, this show would not be possible without our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where every month we release an ad-free version of the podcast, along with bonus podcasts and videos exclusively for our patrons, covering racing documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with other racing series, and a lot of weird things. So if you would like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. What do we have going on this month, Danny?
A bit of a gap in between them this time because we posted the Drive to Survive ones kind of back to back either side of the month break. So all that Drive to Survive goodness is there in the last two episodes. What are we doing in January? Ferrari, I think. That was a fun one. I know a lot of people have been watching it now that it's up on rental for much more reasonable prices than when we had to buy it to check it out. Yeah, and we haven't talked about what we're doing next month, have we? Or have you guys talked while I was away?
We haven't decided yet.
Okay, so if you have any ideas, send them in. shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. Or if you're a patron, just hit us up on the Discord or spam it in the comments. Massive thanks, of course, to all of our incredible title sponsors: Mansell's Mustache, Get Richer, Die Ryan, Agave ATX, Cyphus Training, Turf SCS, App Team Blackjack, Michael Maves, Gordy's Army, at Talking Autos, TelemetryDeck.com, FTC, Drew Stewart, Bailey Foote, Abdullah Al-Thani, Jason Chadwick, Abraham Getchell, The Space Above Us Podcast, Bunny Crimes, Snigs, Alex Goucher, Max Valtar, Circuit Demon, Troy Stammer, William Rumpf, Irvine Clinical Research, Lachlan the Maddened Man, Samurai Love Story, and of course Jason Kelly. Thank you all so much for covering your dirty names all over our clean livery. It's beautiful.
Do you think Bunny Crimes could sell ads on their Patreon
On Bunny
name?
Crimes? It's a good point. It's very meta. Who's done that? I feel like that might have happened before. I feel like the Kick situation is kind of that, where there's one team that own it, but they have like a other sponsor that's sort of there some races. I feel like, did Jordan do this as well? For some reason that seems like a Jordan thing.
I'm just saying, like, I've heard Bunny Crimes on multiple podcasts being thanked as a Patreon sponsor or a patron. So if you just Pepsi and say like, hey,
Well,
right,
I can get you on a bunch of different podcasts.
I'm just gonna say,
yeah,
I appreciate all the support Bunny Crimes gives to folks out there, but the new name Bunny Crimes is tired of being audited does make me wonder if peak Bunny Crime sponsorship era might be about to reach an abrupt terminus.
They're knocking on the door. Get out of there, Bunny Crimes.
Well, it is past April 15th, so I hope things are okay over there. Let's take a look at how things are going in the news. And Danny, let's kick right off with the 2025 calendar.
Yeah, they announced the 2025 F1 calendar. There's still 24 races. They've shifted some stuff around. There's not much there's no new races. Obviously we've had a bunch of those added in the past few years. China, in fact, that we're going to spend most of today talking about, is not a new race, but it's a returning race. The first time we've been here in 4 years, since 2019. But yeah, nothing particularly new. There's a couple of things that were worth noting when I went through it. Australia's back to the front again.
Yeah, it's a real throwback.
Yeah, it's been a while since they did this. It feels like not that long. Like Bahrain, there, around the same time they stopped doing the Barcelona testing as well.
It feels like Bahrain's been the beginning forever
for a hot minute. Yeah, so it'll be cool, I guess, to see that again. It is starting 2 weeks later as well, which is interesting considering we had that weird gap. Remember talking about the fact that there's two gaps,
2 breaks.
I guess.
Yeah.
So I think a large part of this was trying to fix that back up. The other thing as well is, of course, Ramadan sort of moves earlier in the year. With every year we go through. So that was having an effect on Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. So that I think this is also the reason why Australia is back in pole position, as it were. So Saudi and Bahrain are now in April. And also, am I crazy? They were running the races there on Saturdays recently.
Because
certainly.
So they're going to shift that back to Sunday. That's not happening anymore. The traditional break still remains in August with 3 weekends off, the Hungarian Grand Prix beforehand, and then we're back into Zandvoort on the other side of it. And aside from that, it's pretty much all the same, except we don't have that weird extra little gap that we have this year for whatever reason. So they've compressed it a little bit. The start of it's where it's changed the most. But aside from that, yeah, they're basically going to spend most of the start of the calendar year in the Middle East and Asia, Oceania.
It does feel like they're making progress towards solving the too many zigzags in our travel logistics and backtracking. It's not all the way there, but moving these calendar dates around there's always inertia, right? Because there's other stakeholders to get out of the way of and other things that facilities are being booked for. But it does feel like they have made a bit of progress towards at least trying to make it so that the little Indiana Jones red line of showing where the championship is going roughly follows somewhat sensible paths, although there are just some jumps that are going to be arbitrary and kind of big swings, like going from Saudi Arabia to Miami.
And then back to a bunch of European races.
Well, and then Canada always being treated as Montreal. That's part of the European leg of it. That's always been the weirdest thing of Montreal is part of the European phase of the championship. Yeah. I've never understood that at all.
It must be the 1 week the Canadian government can convert Ile-de-France or whatever. You know what I mean? They're just this is it. This is the only time. I guess, right, because they start in Australia, but then because of the shifting Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, we're going Australia, China, Japan, which, as you said, that makes sense. I guess that's kind of where they were. But yeah, and then we're into the Middle East, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, as you said, Miami for some reason, and then Europe with that little Canadian sojourn in the middle of it. Yeah, I'm with you. The weirdness at the start of the season used to always irritate me as well, whereas it's a little bit tidier now, I guess.
Yeah, I like the compressed schedule, starting at March 16th, ending December 7th. Yeah, all right.
We'll have more patron pods next year, I guess, in February, while we're waiting for testing.
I guess so. Yeah. All right, next up, Fernando Alonso will be with Aston Martin for at least 2 more years. He is committed to a new multi-year deal. We don't know exactly how long it is, but multi-year means at least 2. What do you guys think of this? He's 42 years old. They say in these quotes on Autosport, which I think are just a regurgitated press release, Fernando is hungry for success, driving better than ever, fitter than ever, and is completely dedicated to making Aston Martin Aramco a competitive force. That is from, I believe, Mike Crack. Or his
fitter than ever is like I have no doubt that Fernando Alonso takes care of himself. Fitter than ever implies that he wasn't really taking care of himself in his 20s and 30s. If he's 42 and the fittest he has ever been, like that sort of, I'm not so sure about that, sir.
Well, sometimes, I've definitely like known people who just take it for granted, in their 20s and 30s, and then it's like, shit, I need to really like turn my body into the temple to maintain my level of performance. This is how I live my life. But no, like it's been funny the degree to which that's been one of his talking points. Right, earlier this year, he basically did the like it felt like he made his doctor available to the press. It was like, it's incredible. I've never seen anything like it. This man has the body of a 25-year-old.
Is it Donald Trump's doctor?
Who's about to say
it kind of felt like
that.
Yeah. It was like there was like there was a push in the press. Drew and I were talking about this before the show. Where like, does it feel like there's more stories hitting Autosport that were like planted there by PR flax? But there were definitely way more story. There was a wave of stories about just like the incredible shape Alonso is in. Wow. And there being a doctor being like, our performance scientists are just kind of astonished at how he by the calendar age he's in his 40s, but by youth and vigor,
he's a body of a 7-year-old. That's amazing.
it was really something. And then on top of that, he's always doing his just drove the race of my life. It just put that one on a pedestal. That P8 is greater than any of my championships.
See, I worry what he's going to be like when he retires. Is he going to be like that guy who takes his son's blood, try and make himself like the youngest person in the world? Like, I feel like Alonso has such a craving to win that once he's out of F1, he's going to push. It's going to go in a weird direction and I don't know what it is, but I don't trust.
Like, we're gonna discover there's somebody in his basement with like a wasted neck muscles and and then like he's just up there still cracking the walnuts, and someone else is basically like, I can't lift my head anymore. All the muscles have been drained.
I think this is. I wonder if he sniffed around the paddock and everyone was like, nope, and he was like, all right, I'm gonna stick with Aston Martin because
that's
because Aston signed him. Like, they felt this was with a new manufacturer coming in. Honda's poised to be their champion. That was another thing we had to hear in the press, which was Honda being like, it's not going to be like last time. Things were so different. The last time Fernando was telling anyone who would listen what a piece of shit our engine was and how we basically built McLaren a lawnmower. Things are so different since then.
Yeah, I think that what you said, Danny, about him like not being able to find other work, I think is certainly a way to look at it. I think it's probably the most, or it's a less charitable way to look at it. I think a more charitable way is like, we need someone in 2026 with these weird new regulations who knows a thing or two about a car, because we need a driver to be able to shepherd us through this transition period, because our other driver is Lance Stroll.
That is true. That is their other driver.
But also a wrinkle to this is that, well, I imagine either he couldn't find work, or, and this may be an and/or situation, he is just so dazzled by the amount of money that Lawrence Stroll is willing to put into this stuff. We had that article where I think this is from Autosport, saying that Aston Martin had made an offer to poach Adrian Newey from Red Bull, their aerodynamicist, who if you have Adrian Newey, you might win the championship.
Yeah.
I wonder if they're just like, hey, Alonso, listen, you could go somewhere else, or we could be the ones throwing so much money at everything to win.
Yeah, and maybe at him. Yeah.
I
don't know how much he's getting paid.
It's true. So yeah, Alonso's going to stick around for another few years, which is fine. It's fun seeing him mix it up.
I like him.
Meanwhile,
he's out there being
back at his
strategic.
old team.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
He's fun to watch. He's doing those weird DRS antics. George Russell, like he's at least an interesting guy to have on the grid.
He's still in the game, and like I love Valtteri Bottas, but like there are drivers. Alonso is still in the game. He's still got fighting spirit, and he's still he's a great driver. Like, and I also like. I wasn't a huge fan of him during his when he won his championship and stuff. I think him in a title winning car is like the worst elements of Michael Schumacher and some drivers like that are like just absolutely ruthless competitor in a way that I think is sort of, I don't know, doesn't make him particularly likable, at least to me, during those years. I like him in a I have suffered for 15 years kind of way, that I think, hey, if he got a car that was good, I think it'd be really cool. I think that's like a fun arc. Like last year when he was fighting and getting on all those podiums at the start of the season. Yeah. I don't think myself a huge Alonso fan historically, but I was really happy for him. I thought that was super cool. So yeah, I'm happy he's still around, and he's got such a competitive mentality. It's very difficult to criticize anything of any part of his racecraft or any part of his. It's just the way he sometimes crosses the line, which again we saw in Melbourne, right? Like it is part of the way he drives. He drives hard and he wants to win.
But yes, speaking of his old team, Rob.
One of his old teams.
One of his many.
There's the other thing.
It's been around.
Aston making the calculation, we need to renew him because otherwise he's going to burn the building down and just leave the deepest key gouges in the fuselage of our new car.
It's like Ringu. You gotta sell Alonso, you die. Although McLaren seemed to have done well,
So I don't know, Drew. There's no news about Alpine. Don't know why people are talking about it. They're definitely not for sale.
No.
I didn't even ask that, but okay.
We're not for sale.
So this is very fun because, literally, I feel like it might have been just before I'd even gone to bed after we recorded the last episode, the story about Alpine possibly looking around for sale offers.
Oh, no.
For purchase offers. And in no time at all, they put a statement out that the rumors and stories about the team being for sale are false. The team is categorically not for sale. But Autosport, other outlets that carry the story, had details of what the sale might look like, and it is one of those things where it does seem like, as we often learn, companies will be like, it's categorically false that people say that the company is looking at X, and what they mean is nobody's signed a dotted line, but there are always conversations happening. Always. But Alpine, it sounds like, have been casting about for interest in a possible purchase because team sucks. As we've I think we talked about this. It feels like a team that has burned most of its progress that it's made over the past decade, and is kind of in a miserable place, very little to show for years of investment as a works F1 team. And there we come to the issue, a works F1 team. It is possible the team is they're looking around for people who might be willing to acquire them, but there's kind of a poison pill in what people would be acquiring. It sounds like the things that journalists were hearing is that anyone who would, anyone who's considering putting in a bid on Alpine has to meet a condition imposed by Renault, which is that they buy the power unit team, like the power unit development team. To me, that feels like a poison pill. Also, insofar as maybe whatever corporate directive is saying, we might need to at least look at what we can recoup if we sell this team. If someone internally doesn't really want to do this, you put a poison pill in it so that no offers ever come in, right? Because
Right,
you're
yeah.
just like, well, and here's the writer. You got to buy the power unit team, and the reason this is a poison pill is because Renault's power unit has been massively troubled throughout this generation. This is, if I go back to season 1 of Drive to Survive, right, where you've got Christian and Cyril staring daggers at each other because Red Bull was running a Renault power unit and it wasn't competitive with where Ferrari and Mercedes had gotten. But in like the decade, better part of a decade since then, the situation hasn't gotten much better. Like, as of last year, Alpine were trying to get the teams to detune. What if we all agree to detune our engines under the engine freeze? Because, yes, everyone had engine development frozen. We can't, like, tinker with the engines, and we're all supposed to be converged on what performance our engine's capable of achieving. Alpine didn't get there. The word is their engine was, like, 7 horsepower down on the rest of the field. Which is, given how razor thin the margins are between these cars, a small difference in power potential like that is fatal. So to have Alpine out there exploring, like, well, if anyone's interested in buying the team, you have to buy the worst power unit division on the grid. That's going to be non-starter. Now, I don't know if it is you have to use their engine, but you at least have to buy the engineers. If you're one of those engineers, that seems like the company's doing you a solid. They're not going to sell the team and sell the F1 entrant off while letting the entire workforce just get demolished. I don't know if maybe there's French laws about like you can't do a sale like this if it means that X number of workforce lose their job at time of sale. But either way, right now Alpine is saying there's nothing to the rumors. And then the, off the record conversations that journalists have heard is that Alpine is at least insisting that a power unit, that their sort of powertrains division, be part of the sale.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to look at it from like Andretti's perspective, and I don't know, man. I don't think it's not a compelling offer to have to buy that power unit, as much as F1 entries are coveted.
It does feel like it'd be time to explore sale, though, right? Like it feels like just things have been so
like this is
such a skid.
Yeah. If not that, then what? Then it's a real chop the heads off of who are in French fashion, of who's at the top and rebuild like this. I feel like there's been no shortage of conversations about just the many ways in which organizationally they seem, can't even get their contract signed on time.
Yeah, it seems like they're the solution has been to axe the team principal every time things stumble, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if like that clearly isn't the answer.
No. Go higher. Yeah.
Yeah, we remember from Alain Prost, his salty exit from there.
Parting words, exactly. Wasn't very enamored with leadership. Yeah,
exactly. So I think that's where it would have to be.
Which part state-owned company, shit happens. You get a lot of people very comfy. You get a lot of people. You get a culture of, you get some bit of culture of lackadaisicalness or whatever. It's always hard to tell, but yeah.
Renault, good for government
seems like
work.
a tricky one.
Well, it does occur to me, this is a good point because Prost made a comment about this years ago where before Alpine, he ran, I think he might have run Renault's previous F1 effort in another generation. Maybe it was a different French manufacturer. But his opinion was always why the project was doomed, was that France... It's expensive. Like, taxes are high in France. It's expensive to build and maintain a workforce in France. The UK is much more business friendly, and so you're up against UK located teams. As a French company, you're always going to be less flexible. and your head count is always going to cost sort of more per head than people you're up against in the UK. And that occurs to me, I wonder if that's handling different in the cost gap era. Because if you're sitting there being like, my assumption is something like payroll taxes in the US, right? Where like every time, every employee, a certain percentage of their wages, the company pays directly as payroll tax. I wonder if something like that is going on with a company like Alpine, where in the cost cap era, do you get hit extra hard if you are in sort of a higher business corporate tax environment? I wonder, because that would be a huge competitive disadvantage to be anywhere but whoever is offering like the lowest local corporate taxes.
Specifically, it is for Renault, because Renault is a public owned company, and also like you can get away with it if you're all these other companies who are just private companies who are all based in England, even if they're technically named after German or Italian or whatever it is. But like Ferrari's never moving, and Renault can't really move either. So yeah, they're I doubt there's any allowances for that within the cost cap. I mean, maybe there is somewhere, some detailed stuff, but like, yeah, you got to pay your taxes, you got to pay your employees the wages that are expected in that country and all that sort of stuff. And also just the pool of engineers. Like, you work for a French company, you got to speak French. You know what I mean? Like Fred Vasseur knows all about that. Especially if you're involved in such like detailed work, like technical work, it's very, very difficult to do that type of work as a non-native speaker. So just the pool of people they could hire, I bet, is also just smaller,
Well, we shall see. We shall also see how the sprint race goes at the Chinese Grand Prix, Danny.
We shall. The first of the year. The first of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And maybe not the best choice for it, according to a lot of the drivers. So there's been a couple of, obviously lots of questions of the grid about going back to China, because we have not been back there in a while. We'll talk about that when we do the track walk. But the issue, of course, with the sprint race is that it compresses the weekend down into one single practice session. And there are sort of two issues why this might be a problem. One, they haven't driven here in a while, and it's hard to acclimatize themselves back to a track in a single practice session. The other thing is that the track has been resurfaced in the intervening years, and whenever that happens, oftentimes there is worries about things like curbs or manhole covers in the worst cases, or any drainage or anything that can either cause a problem on the track, or worst case scenario, red flag the only practice session you have in a weekend. So we got two quotes here. First from Prerace: "I just hope that there are no issues with the track, any drain holes, any issues like that. That would really put us out of sync." Sainz said, "We also heard there's been resurfacing going on, so Istanbul 2.0 may be on the cards. I hope not." He's referring to Istanbul back in 2020 when they had a resurfacing and there was a bunch of issues in the lead up to the race.
Like low grip, right? And low abrasion.
Low grip, yeah.
I think that was
exactly
the chief concern there.
That's the issue, and also just like imagine on a Sunday race you've had a certain amount of running. When they start the sprint race, there's not going to be that much rubbering in by the time they're at race pace for an extended period of time. So that's also an issue. One person who may not care about this very much is Guan Yu Zhou, because not only is he, of course, the first Chinese F1 driver, but this will be the first time he has had the opportunity to drive in his, not just his native country, but outside the city he grew up in. He is from Shanghai. And so this is to the point where he was at the first race in 2004 as a spectator.
Oh, wow.
As a shot. So you might have noticed on some of the marketing for the race, they have Zhou sort of front and center, which you tend to get a lot of. Same thing happens, lots of Daddy in Australia and stuff
Paris,
like that.
yeah.
Sonoda, and exactly. But this is, obviously him being the first Chinese driver is a big deal. But obviously this is also very personal to him. So very cool to see him out there. We don't, hopefully the pit stops are okay. I think more than anything. They'll only have one practice session to do some practice pit stops. So they hopefully they get them in. But yeah, pretty cool for him, I think.
Yeah. The other thing about there only being one practice session is that not only have they not been there in a while, the cars are totally different from the last time they were. Like, we got 18-inch wheels, we got ground effect going on. Like, it is a lot like a completely new track for these teams to get a handle on in an hour.
They really like this track, though. The drivers do. It's one of the most popular ones in the driver pool of the year. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in the track walk.
We sure will, and that's going to do it for news. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we will be right back with the track walk. All right, Danny, take us to Shanghai.
Shanghai. So they built this track. They started building it back in 2003. $450 million to build a big track in the Zhejiang district of Shanghai. It's not that far outside of Shanghai. I always thought it was further. It's only about 40 minutes outside of the center of town. It's like about just about further than the
People talked
airport
about this facility like it's on the fucking moon.
They did. So I've always wondered about this. Maybe
it's just that awful commuting around Shanghai where it's like if you just get in the wrong, like.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe people don't. Maybe there's not a big car culture. Maybe I honestly don't know. Like, I mean, commuter car culture. I have no idea. But yeah, they always talked about that because when they built this track, this circuit, they did build very big grandstands. So maybe that was the problem, is that they built far too many of these grandstands and they just can't fill them all.
I read maybe in that article, Danny, or one of these, that they added even more. They just added 20,000 more grandstand seats.
I have to look up the capacity for.
I think it's 200,000.
200,000. It is. It's 200,000. And you can see why infrastructurally they cared about that. They did care about grandstands, because the main grandstand in China is insane. It is like big on both sides. It has like a sort of like a bridge cover around it. It's a big imposing building. It reminds me of, what's the other one that has the big one? What's the one we've not had in a while?
Malaysia?
Malaysia, yes. Malaysia was the other one that has a similarly sort of really big grandstand that you don't see them that big that often.
Well, with Malaysia, it also shares the, hey, want to see cars go real fast on a real long straight? Twice.
Yeah. You want some weird looking turns? Malaysia's got a couple of those as well, like little off camber ones. The outline of the track is meant to resemble the symbol Shang, obviously Shanghai, taking from Shang, which means upward in Chinese. I don't know what Chinese. I should have looked into that. Is it Cantonese? Is it? I couldn't tell you. The first race was in 2004, which was the first year we had Bahrain as well. So it's in that level. In my head, it feels like a new track, but it has been 20 years, I guess, although not 20 races, as we talked about. The circuit length is 5.5 kilometers, which I did usually convert to miles, and I forgot, which is 3.4 miles or so, 56 laps. The last time we raced here was in 2019, back when Lewis Hamilton won the race on the way to beating Bottas for his 6th championship, if you can remember those days.
Oh my God, that feels like 2 decades ago.
Doesn't it? I was surprised. I was like, what year was that? 2019. Was that Max's first? Right. Of course it was, yeah. But isn't that nuts? I couldn't believe that was only 2019, back in those the halcyon days of Hamilton and Bottas.
That was
fighting it out. It's got that big old grandstand just in terms of the track itself. It's got the longest straight on the F1 calendar. Longest straight. Is it the longest straight in F1 history? I'm guessing Spa back in 1960 had a longer straight. Back when it was like a 40-mile track, probably had a longer straight.
I don't know. This is Aero straight, right? Like,
yes,
Spa's always had like little kinks even in the flat sections of it, but like this is like a runway for a jumbo jet.
Yeah. I wonder what's the minimum on a 747 coming in. I wonder if it's as
well, Danny. We could probably attempt this in Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Microsoft Flight Simulator, right?
Go find this outside of Shanghai.
It'd be a real shame though, because you'd land there and there'd be no one in the stands to see it. The stands in fairness,
it might be a tricky.
maybe some aerodynamic wake turbulence from the cars driving on the track though. He'd be a little bit tricky there. So in fairness, the stands there tends to have a lot of people in them. There's one in particular that it's actually a beautiful looking stand. It's kind of it reminds me of 130R for some reason, because it's like a circle bending out the way, and it covers the whole sort of the sector 2 area. The grandstand, it's a very imposing building, but oftentimes it's quite empty. Actually, that might be a good reason why they're doing the sprint race, because just practice here tends to be not particularly popular. But it has that really long straight. Obviously, that is a great overtaking area. So is the start finish straight, which is somewhat immediately after that, after a quick, short little hairpin turn, and then the pit entry. The first turn in this track is just like Herman Tilke had a couple of glasses of wine, maybe.
Wait till you see what I did with the Chinese Grand Prix.
See John Malkovich?
Werner Herzog, I think.
I cannot explain the shape of this turn. It's just a counterclockwise, clockwise, multiple.
It looks like a yin and yang.
It does. The other thing that you can't get off this track is that the height difference on this turn is also crazy, because where you start on turn 1, by the time you've gotten down into what is, I guess, turn 3, you've gone down like 80 feet or something. It's like it really bowls down, which, is I always just think it's incredible the cars don't hit each other here, because especially when they're going down, they really don't have a view of the front of their cars. They can kind of see the cars ahead of them a little bit easier, but it's so tricky for them. So that's also bizarre. You tend to get overtaking here, but you tend to get overtaking in particular places. You tend to get overtaking after the first 2 straights. The drivers really like it here, especially the fast turns 7 and 8. They're sort of high speed Senna S's almost. It's a fun little track, and if nothing else, it'll just be cool to be back here, because 5 years, as you said, does not feel that long ago, but. Just imagine Valtteri Bottas fighting for a championship, and then just look at him in his green little car and go, "Oh yes, that was quite a while ago."
It certainly was. It will be cool, Danny, but not temperature-wise.
Oh,
you like that? You like that?
I do. Yeah, it was good.
So we've got sprint qualifying here on Friday at 4:30 local. So we got 69 degrees Fahrenheit, 21 Celsius. Looks like 33% chance of rain for sprint qualifying. However, that drops to 15% at sprint time. Temperature about the same. And then, so the sprint and qualifying for the race are on the same day, and only 5% chance at qualifying time. And a little warmer. It looks like we got 22 Celsius. Or 72 Fahrenheit. Race time, though, 3 p.m. local, 66 degrees Fahrenheit, so a little cooler, 19 Celsius. Precipitation, 11%. So could be some sprinkles, could be some on and off, could be nothing.
God, you gotta be careful in that qualifying not to ruin your car, too. Although,
Williams.
Totally. Do they even have a car? I thought they smashed all theirs on the way here.
Frantically trying to call manufacturers in the Shanghai region to see if we get you these files, how quickly can you fabricate
an 3D printer?
Car?
They're asking.
I should warn you, it's a spreadsheet. It's in English. It's really big. Do you have any Windows 3.1 computers in your office?
Exactly. Yeah. Do you have deluxe paint installed? I think that's the only way. It's a BMP file. They'll ask Claire Williams to jump in first class with a new front wing again. Right. Just to remind everyone that this is not a new problem for Williams. I just thought it would be also maybe handy just to remind people of when the sprint races are, the 6 that I was saying. Sure. China is the first one. Miami is the next one.
Which is the next race, is it not?
Oh God, is it? It's
Am I
2
wrong?
weeks after that, so it must be. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Austria then, before the break, just at the end of June. Then the US Grand Prix in COTA in Austin in the end of October, followed very quickly by the Sao Paulo Grand Prix and then Losail as well. So we have 3 of them sort of pretty close to the end of the season.
Boy, you're right.
Yeah,
3 in 5 races.
Yeah, that's
Boy,
gonna be a lot.
we're gonna be tired at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Let's go over the driver standings before we head into the Chinese Grand Prix weekend. Max Verstappen is on top with 77 points. His teammate Sergio Perez is in second place with 64 points. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, right behind them in third with 59. His teammate Carlos Sainz is in fourth with 55. Then a jump down to Lando Norris in fifth with 37. His teammate Oscar Piastri, look at this, 2x2, is in sixth with 32. George Russell and Fernando Alonso are tied at 7th and 8th with 24 points. Lewis Hamilton is in 9th with 10 points, and Lance Stroll is in 10th with 9 points. Then we've got Tsunoda with 7, Behrman with 6, Hulkenberg with 3, Magnussen with 1 in 14th place, and then Albon, Zhou, Ricardo, Ocon, Gasly, Bottas, and Sargent all have 0. In the constructor standings, Red Bull Racing is on top with 141 points to Ferrari's 120. Meanwhile, McLaren is in third with 69 points, Mercedes in fourth with 34, Aston Martin 33 in fifth place. RB is a distant sixth place with 7 points. Gene Haas' team have 4 points in 4 races. And then Williams, Sauber, and Alpine all have 0 points. If you'd like to get on the scoreboards yourself, you could do so at our in our Shift+F1 Fantasy League using the link in the show notes. I'm not doing super hot, but maybe you will have better luck. You can also hit us up on the emails, shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. Also the links in the show notes. Rob, what are some emails that people sent us for this week?
Well, we asked and we brought in the bikers.
Bike sickos have
Hear
arrived.
them coming.
Yeah, they've arrived. Danny, do you want to read this first one
their colors?
from Lee?
Yeah, sure. Lee writes in, as a massive fan of both F1 and GP, I enjoyed the discussion of Liberty's bid to purchase MotoGP. In short, I hope they add another US race in addition to COTA. They used to have Indy, but the last race there was in 2015. I attended, and it was a lot of fun. Also, nice. I wouldn't assume that your typical Harley guy isn't interested in racing. Moto America has done an excellent job of drawing in this crowd by creating the King of the Baggers support series. I have looked this up. It is amazing.
Okay.
Where they race highly modified bagger-style cruisers.
Holy
Look it up.
shit.
Yes, they are wild. It looks like somebody got like a cartoon, a children's cartoon, like mushed together a MotoGP bike and a fucking Harley Davidson.
Whoa.
How do they turn in these things?
I'm going to put a link to this in the show notes.
King of the Baggers. The problem is a lack of track safe enough for GP bikes. As you've pointed out on the pod, they require bigger runoff areas or gravel traps. Maybe they would invest in a new track that could host both F1 and GP, not to mention the WSBK series included in the deal. This brings me to my last point. As a GP fan, part of my heart will break because I really like how niche and under the radar GP is. It will be strange to see it slightly dumbed down and packaged for the US audience. Longtime F1 fans will know what I mean. Keep the shiny side up from Lee in New York City. Yeah. King of the Baggers. Great. See, embrace the weird. Didn't we talk the whole time about like how F1 should like get a bit funky with it? Like my favorite, I love going down to the Petaluma Speedway and checking out just the races that are on there. Part of the novelty is that they have 4 different series and they're all bananas looking. You're like, this is absolutely insane. And like, yes, there's loads of different breeds of motorsport enjoyer, I guess. And some people are real petrol heads or they like really high performance cars, but yeah, like mixing this stuff up, you know, they do tend to do them on a weekend. Like you'll have the classic car stuff and all that, but king of the baggers. Like, yeah, I'd love to see something novel done like that.
I know exactly what Lee means by, liking how under the radar it is, and some apprehension for a larger profile. I think though, you can't get all the crazy out of MotoGP. Like I will, the first season I watched, I remember watching Marc Marquez crash his motorcycle in qualifying, flip into the gravel, and then literally run back to the pits, get on his second bike, and then go pole position. Like, those guys are insane, and you can't hide that. So I imagine that even if we get a little bit of a slicker package, there's still going to be, I think there's still going to be some stuff for the sickos out there.
I don't know why. I don't know why MotoGP isn't bigger. I feel like almost it doesn't want to be. Like, I feel like almost to what Lee is talking about, that it is important that it's trying to. I mean,
motorcycles are more of an
weird.
Insular. Yeah, like they're
Maybe.
more of a.
But as a sport, I think it's more watchable than F1 and has been for a long time. The races aren't as long. Mm-hmm. You clearly can see the racecraft because you can see the driver all the time and you can see what they're doing. I've been watching MotoGP like on and off for a decade, and the camera angles are always. I'm still flabbergasted by what they're doing. Like, it seems completely terrifying whenever there's especially when they're having tight fights. MotoGP over the past few years has had just like, you've had people like Marquez who've come in, right, and completely, sort of upended the way, the dominance of previous people. But you don't tend to get this sort of year on year dominance. And I don't know what that is. Maybe it's something to do with the physicality of it and people getting injured, or maybe it's got something to do with the team dynamics and the engines that I don't fully appreciate. But MotoGP on a season-long level for the past whatever, as long as I've been sort of keeping an eye on it, has been really fascinating. You've had years where people have run away with it. You've had years where you've had really tight battles. But individual races are frequently like down like four bike sprints to the finish line. Or there was one about 3 weeks ago. Did you see where the guy came back he was fifth and he won it on the final turn? Like, wow. That stuff happens all the time in MotoGP.
And you know what happens also all the time is the guy in the lead can just wipe out.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
that happens frequently. Like, that doesn't happen virtually ever in Formula One.
And you can do it, and then that's it. It's like, you have a rough one. So I don't know what it is. I don't know why it doesn't want to be any bigger. Maybe it doesn't need to be. Maybe, it seems to bring in it's got a really passionate, dedicated crowd. Doesn't seem, I don't know if they're struggling to get people to watch it or to attend, but I've never gotten that sense.
The
like
acquisition
you do with
price
stuff with
that
NASCAR
paid suggests that this is not a distressed asset at all. Like,
right.
It's like they didn't get a fire sale price. They got we are F1 tier in terms of like worldwide appeal and growth potential. So yeah, I think like it's kind of an odd thing. The thing that the sort of Americanization of everything. I think the thing that's really frustrating, and I think I feel really intensely, is that oftentimes when people are like, how do we package this for Americans? The assumption is that Americans are very stupid and Americans are very patriotic.
Right.
And, well, those are two caricatured visions of the U.S. Like, if you're like, if George W. Bush is your sort of like quintessential American, I guess, like, I see how you get there. But the thing is, like, American sports fans are not less sophisticated than their peers elsewhere. In fact, in many ways, like, they might be more so, because
I'm wearing a beret right now.
I'll say one thing: a lot of American sports are a lot more complicated than a lot of sports that are popular in Europe.
Yeah, and yet the assumption is always,
yeah,
you've got to you need a spoonful of sugar to make like this, massively popular sport go down. And I think that's often the thing that, like, it's stuff like that I don't think is for anyone. Like, it's not going to reach the imagined American audience. Like, American audiences will be like, if you put something awesome in front of them, make them aware of it, like it'll sort of attract an audience. But there's often this sense that like we just have to make it like big and goofy in WrestleMania, to make it work. And I think that assumption is often faulty. But a lot of people working in American media believe that to be the case, and will like. That's why people think like once Americans get hold of it, they ruin it. It's because like a lot of American media types also have like massively low opinions of like the audience and like produce content for an imagined dipshit.
I also think there's like kind of a misunderstanding and like about sort of what sports becoming popular and the particular American element of that. I think when it comes to F1 in particular, like Drive to Survive has been popular in getting people into Formula One in lots of different places, not just America. Yeah. The difference with America is, in a lot of Europe, Formula One was something that was on television and just was sort of, I guess, in front of people's eyes. So more of the casual audience in Europe have been exposed to F1 over the years. And so the growth potential of that casual audience in Europe, this is me intuiting, and I don't have the figures in front of me, but I imagine that this is the case. The growth potential wasn't as high as a place like America where you don't have that. So it's not that like Drive to Survive has only made it popular in America. It's just that America has like 360 million people or whatever it is. There's a lot of folks, and the growth potential in America is really large as opposed to a place like the UK. But like I still have friends in Ireland and the UK who are now into F1 who weren't before, or people who were back in the Senna and Schumacher days, who weren't for a long time, who now will watch a race again for the first time in 20 years. And it's funny, like also an element of the Americanization of some of these sports is it comes down to, I think, to like subtle cultural differences in how we broadcast sport. And I think people are very, very, very sensitive to. I was today complaining about a commentator on oddly enough, he's an English guy, but he's a commentator on I think it's CBS Sports or whatever, when I was watching Champions League game today, who I cannot stand, and I cannot watch on CBS when he's doing them because of this commentator. And I think the tricky thing, I mean, we talk about it all the time with like Crofty and Brundle, and do you listen to F1 TV? And I think like people are very, 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 very sensitive to that sort of stuff, and that's fine. There's probably people who listen to this podcast for the first time and go, oh, I don't like the vibe of this. That's not my type of Formula 1 and they go, right? So I think we're very sensitive to that. And I think when F1 gets that mainstreamy and you like the flavor of the soup you've been eating for the past 10 years and it starts to change a little bit, I think we're very, very sensitive to that. So it's the risk reward, I don't know what MotoGP, I want more people to like MotoGP, because when I had people come up to me like Girk back when we did the MotoGP primer here on Shift F1, he was advocating for it and he got me into it, and then I really liked it and I was really glad. So for people, I want MotoGP to get big because I want more people to enjoy it. But I don't know if MotoGP needs it. I guess is, but then I'm not an expert.
But the
on
people
MotoGP.
need MotoGP.
Kind of like I think when people find out, it's like how pro wrestling has gotten cool again. It's like WWE stuff, and like not just WWE, like lots of wrestling stuff around the world. Like it's cool to like things, it's fun to like things. Life is difficult enough, and especially when you stumble upon a new sport, like it's really exciting to be a bit older in life and find a new hobby or something you're passionate about. And I do really think MotoGP is it's easier to get into than a lot of motorsports, and it's also a great craft. It's not a simplified or reduced thing. There's so much detail and so much history and so much like culture. Like God, so much history and culture in MotoGP with the bikes, like as much as F1. Like when it comes to drivers and the bikes and the tracks and all that sort of stuff.
So some of this context comes in from another motorcycle racing email we got from Chris. With the somewhat ominous subject line, "You wanted opinions," but it's a good email.
That's a threat.
I'm a big F1 fan and a long-term motorcyclist. Used to cover World Superbikes for Motorcycle Online. It's very obvious to me how weirdly separate F1 and motorcycling is in the way the bike people are amazed at how the recent aero innovations have made dirty air an issue and overtaking more difficult. Obviously, they haven't seen any F1 in the last 3 decades. There is way more crossover in the participants. Hamilton and Norris are known to idolize Valentino Rossi. Rossi had an F1 test with Ferrari in the early 2000s and was competitive, but chose to stay on his bike. Both sports still idolize John Surtees, the only man to operate at a top level in F1 and bikes. Later on, he had his own F1 team as well. Short-term implications of the Liberty Media deal. BMW has just started winning in World Superbikes and has lately been making noises about moving up to MotoGP. That will now happen. Longer-term ramifications. MotoGP is run by a Spanish company, Dorna.
Unsurprising.
Currently, 10 out of 22 riders in MotoGP are Spanish. That's ridiculous in a world sport. Imagine if half the F1 grid were Brits, just because the cream rises to the top. I can't figure out if Chris is taking the piss here, because how many British drivers are there in F1 right now? It's Russell, it's Hamilton, it's Norris.
It depends if Albon, he could,
you could, but he raced under the Thai flag, so.
But yeah.
I guess maybe it does. Maybe there aren't as many as it sometimes feels, as British that sport can feel. But yeah, 10 out of 22 is pretty intense. Anyway, MotoGP probably needs more manufacturers, as it looks like the Japanese are pulling out. It will now likely get them. Dorna are continually tempting Triumph, so far without success. Aston Martin, believe it or not, has a demo race motorcycle.
What?
There are Chinese manufacturers just appearing in Supersport, one level below World Superbikes. World Superbikes will be a difficult sell to the F1 world because it looks pretty much the same as MotoGP to the casual viewer. Before Dorna, World Superbikes was an actual competitor championship to MotoGP, so I wonder if they will make obvious changes to the format, like ban bodywork. Back in its origins, the Superbike racing was near naked, but for nose fairings.
Wow.
I try to cover cross F1, MotoGP, World Superbikes on my blog, durango95.uk. That kind of got stopped by lockdown. Final thing, I searched for years to find an F1 podcast as good as yours. Oh, thank you. The only other
still hasn't found it.
Pardon?
He still hasn't found one.
The only other motorsport podcast on your level is this. This I highly recommend. Paddock Pass podcast.com.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Yeah.
I had no idea. Japanese manufacturers about to pull out of MotoGP, because when I think of high performance bikes, it's like Japanese, and then it's like Ducati. That's kind of like where my head goes immediately.
I love thinking about MotoGP because it puts me in the headspace of what I think. I'm no F1 savant. Like I've been watching the sport for a long time, so I've got like a lot of accumulated knowledge. But it always is fun when you go to another motorsport that like I could tell you like, I know how to pronounce all the drivers' names in MotoGP, but like, and I know some of the history of who they came from and yada yada yada. But I couldn't tell you a single thing about the bikes themselves or the history of that type of thing. I'm so plugged out of that world. So it's always fun to sort of compare and contrast a sport that you feel like you're comfortable talking about and one that you feel like an outsider in. So yeah, a lot of that stuff is new to me. And World Superbikes is one that I don't know why I've had trouble connecting with it. Maybe again it's because of that, because it just feels very close to, like maybe it was like when Indian kart were happening or something, where you're like, why is there 2 of these? I don't know.
Well, World Superbikes is their production bikes, right? That are tuned.
Okay.
And then MotoGP are bespoke, like F1. It's like F1 versus DTM or something, I think.
Yeah.
But I think Chris, by the way, he said I think he meant a MotoGP podcast like ours. Paddock Pass podcast.com is a MotoGP podcast. Not F1
terrific.
Podcast.
Excellent.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe he'll listen. Although
Everyone go watch MotoGP. That's what you should do on the weekends when there's no races, when there's no F1. Just go.
100%.
Their
Listen
TV
to our
offering as well.
Go
is so good.
go find our primer. It's probably way out of date. Listen to that.
We probably all sound like this.
Then watch Hitting the Apex, and then listen to our Patreon episode of that, and then watch MotoGP.
And then if you think MotoGP is scary, go watch TT 3D Closer to the Edge.
Oh my God.
About the Isle of Man TT. And never worry about yourself ever again.
Right.
Those people are different. Every person who rides a motorbike has some balls or has a screw loose or maybe both. But I gotta respect it. Every time I see, especially here in California where you can lane split. Every time I see a bike, I'm like, I'm making as much space for this motherfucker as possible. And then they give you that little finger thing, and you're like, yeah, I'm cool.
We're cool.
I'm your bro, biker bro.
Should I take this next one here?
Sure, bro.
This comes in from Andrew. I'm a longtime F1 fan, been watching the series since 2012. In that time, I've literally only seen 2 teams win the Constructors' Championship. Red Bull, Mercedes, and now Red Bull again. Similarly, aside from the one-off Nico Rosberg Championship, I've only seen 3 drivers win the Drivers' Championship: Vettel, Hamilton, and Verstappen. I'm no stranger to domination eras across F1, so maybe it has inoculated me from the very loud complaints coming from most of F1 media about how boring the sport is. I'll give it to most people that we haven't seen this kind of domination like we've seen with Verstappen, but you have to go back to even before Michael Schumacher to really see some more up-in-the-air seasons, obviously with some notable exceptions, Braun in 2009 being my personal historical favorite. Do you think with the increase of F1 global interest post Drive to Survive and the amount of social media coverage we have these days that the fan base is driving the conversation about how 2024 is already a write-off after less than 20% of the season has been run? Because honestly, domination of a season has been the status quo for almost 2 decades, more than a truly competitive season-long fight like we were spoiled with in 2021. Keep doing what you do, guys. Thanks, Andrew.
I think this is a sort of an inertia problem or like an expectation problem where we, in more recent years, had been promised a break from this. And we started to see it in the Hamilton-Verstappen battle, right? That was it. That was what we've been going towards. That is what what Liberty and the new regulations and Ross Brawn, that was the whole thing. Like, this is what we were going towards, and we had that fantastic season, and it was so exciting, and it was after a time, a difficult period for the world, and right when Drive to Survive was blowing up. And I think what's happened is that we've just sort of very abruptly sort of course corrected back to what was going on before. And like Verstappen's dominance is, Hamilton's dominance was, he had 6 seasons, and he scrapped with Bottas for a bit, and obviously the Rosberg one was the real one, but those seasons were as dominant. But there's something different. I think there's 2 things for me. One is there's more races, and 2 is the way we consume sports is just so constant now. Like, back 10 years ago, you'd forget about F1 in between races. And we're part of this problem probably. But podcasts, sports, reporting, F1 has changed from like a fairly like globally popular but large, in many ways niche sport where you'd really want to be a sort of a bit of an anorak to search out news online about the sport. Now it's just we're presented with that stuff on a day-to-day basis, and so I think our relationship with how the sport is reported on is actually probably influencing that feeling where we're just, because what else do you talk about? It has to come up a lot, So I think that's a big part of it. It's just the way in which sports are reported, the way we consume it, and the length of the season we're going to get this year. That and the only thing that stops a dominant team is if their engine blows up and we're at the end of a long sort of era of these certain cars, and that Red Bull is just it's never going to break down. So we kind of know when he gets in front, that's it.
I think also is right now at a fever pitch because we just came off of last season where Red Bull won all but 1 race. And so we're now looking down the barrel, potentially, this is the fear, right, of that happening again. And that I think is maybe what's contributing.
And that is the thing that I think that is the prime difference. Schumacher wasn't dominant in this way. Hamilton was never dominant in this way.
You don't think so?
In terms of Mercedes may have been, right?
Right.
And Ferrari 2004 may have been. But it was rarely all concentrated on one driver in this same way. And it is even those legendarily dominant cars that like Mercedes and Ferrari put out did not completely like
That's true.
blank out a championship season the way that Red Bull did last year. Like that is
Hamilton,
the part that the difference in degree is meaningful. Where it's like, well, like any given race, obviously probably Hamilton or Schumacher is going to win, but like a lot of other drivers still won F1 races in that era. And last year was like, there's no one. There's no one in the car. They could hold a candle to him, and the other guy in the Red Bull is a non-entity.
Yeah, that might be a big part of the problem. Is at least you had Bottas at Rosberg. Bottas putting up a sort of an honest fight. Maybe he was never really that close, but Rosberg.
And Rosberg and Hamilton had like 2 or 3 seasons where it was clear their relationship was like getting toxic. It was
that crash in Spain. So
like you would have
moments.
more, and then Rosberg nipped one of those, right?
Yeah,
like just doink, got it.
And in fairness, Hamilton's like his first championship win was super tight. The one he should have won prior.
Oh, you mean the one he stole from Felipe Massa? Yeah, the Bernie Ecclestone ripped from.
You on his
Felipe
legal
Massa's
team?
hand.
Jesus Christ!
But
he had some tight ones, and then also Vettel did. Like Hamilton was nipping at his heels. There was a lot of hard fought ones there as well.
Well, and Vettel, like him and Weber went hammer and tongs. There.
Multi-21.
Vettel decisively got the upper hand, but it was again you had this sense of, wow, these are 2 guys who both realize this car's good enough they might be able to do it, and now they're pulling knives on each other. And that's just been not the case. Like Max is dominant within that team in a way that probably haven't seen since the height of Schumacher. Where when Barrichello was thoroughly relegated to the second position of that team. But yeah, this like
Massa
sense
and
of
Alonso.
Yeah, but this sense of like there's a million races, and they're all going to be won by this one guy, this one team. I think that is the difference in degree, and I think that is why like team dominance is a historical fact of F1, and I think you sort of sign up knowing you're in for that. If you're a longtime fan every season, you're kind of expecting it to work this way. But I think you touched on everything, Danny. I think the degree to which they also screwed up the rules to sort of like try to break Mercedes dominance and like make racing more interesting. I think it is palpable the degree to which the drivers like the cars less. I think it is palpable the degree to which like these guys enjoy their job. They are less excited to drive these cars than they've been at any point I've seen watching F1. I think with good reason. Something about them, they don't look agile. They don't have the sort of like,
Newey had some. So we didn't bring this up in the news, but Adrian Newey talked to Autosport and sort of gave his view on the 2026 regulations, and I'll pull some quotes on the fly here. But his big thing is like the cars are huge. They should be smaller, and that doesn't necessarily have to conflict with the sustainability and safety goals of Formula One. Because he's basically saying that like the only reason they're huge is because, and they're going to be huge. So next year, 2026 cars, half of the power needs to come from the battery.
You're right.
And we've talked a little bit about this before. That means that, in effect, the combustion engine will be running as a generator and will be revving kind of all the time, even when you're in low speed corners,
funny.
which is going to sound really weird. But his point, and I don't know if this is accurate or if I agree, but like his point is like we could go smaller with the cars, and be more energy efficient, because even though these things would be using hybrid power, they're still using a lot of power. So if we had a smaller, nimbler car, it would actually use less power to run, and would be, a better product to watch.
You know what's funny thing about F1 is that whenever you talk to someone about F1, I don't know if this is the case, but I feel like a lot is made of the fact that these cars are really fast, and I've never cared. Like the speed of the cars,
I care that they're
in
the
and
fastest.
of itself.
Yeah.
I guess I do in some way. I don't want them to be slow, but there are previous eras of F1 where the cars weren't faster, where the cars were better and cooler and were more interesting. Like I feel like we're getting lost down the hole of speed for a while. Now we're sort of in with the sustainability, which I totally get, but yeah, I've never cared about the speed. Like I'd happily watch slower cars that had better racing. It's not. I'm not that infatuated with it. So yeah, I don't know. It's worrying hearing off from Newey as well. You're like, I think that'll be a real moment. I think people are impatient now already, and it's going to be a while until these new regulations are where we have these new cars. And I think that's going to be a real sea change moment for people. It's either going to be like, all right, it was worth the wait, or nope, guess I'm out.
And also, like, I know I bang this drum every episode, but like the fact that the cost cap era meant the teams would get barely any races into these extremely long seasons and be like, we're just not going to be competitive this year. We're focusing our efforts on next year's car. That is ridiculous. It is basically like, you know how like demoralizing it is. Like, Dan, you follow, I think, more traditional sports, but like when teams like time to blow it up, tear it down, like enter a rebuilding era.
Yeah.
And if you're a fan, you're like, that could be years, and that's not to guarantee it'll work. F1 teams are telling fans, the teams they're the teams are supposed to be taking the fight to whoever the front runner is. Every year they're telling fans like, not this year. We're 2 races into a 23 race season, and we're taking ourselves out of the fight.
You know what doesn't solve that problem, but makes that problem. I feel like the fallow year thing happens a little bit more in American sports. Maybe one part of it is probably things like the draft, where you're incentivized in some ways. The other one is there is a lack of fear of relegation. Yes. Which is the big one in you have one bad year in the Premier League, you're down in the Championship with the minnows, and then often what happens is all your best players leave, and your manager does, and suddenly you're down in League One, which is confusing because it's the 3rd division. But you obviously also don't. There's no incentive outside of just, I guess, money for the teams at the bottom for sinking it. But you're not going to fix that, because like Mercedes are the team that it's annoying who are having their fallow year, and they're still going to come in like 3rd or 4th, right? So but it is a problem, yeah.
But they don't have the capacity to be like, I don't care what it takes. We got 20 races left. We are just going to, like, the reason Braun didn't run away with that championship, right, is because it was like you were watching the big teams swing their big guns around and slowly train in on the targets for that year's like technical rule set. And once they did, their capacity to just like close the gap immediately with what Braun GP had done very cleverly with the rules was really profound, and it becomes a really competitive championship. And I think in cost cap era, a team gets out ahead like Braun GP did, and you will just have teams be like, fuck it. And I think the other issue is that, like, if they could win a race weekend, that might also start them doing it. But it must be completely demoralizing to be putting all that work in
and the gap is so big between you and Red Bull. Like the years. It's not like we're having years of Max Verstappen dominance upon years. It's not quite at that level yet, where it kind of felt that way after the Hamilton years. Even if some of those were competitive, it's the brand of, it's how far ahead they are. That's the issue, and the fact that they have such great reliability. And like, you know, I'm sure if it was close enough, Mercedes would want to win like Silverstone, you know what I mean, or you know, or whatever one they want. And I think, or Ferrari at Monza, right? You still get that. You still get the Ferrari turn up to Monza, right? They have to turn up at Monza, and we're sort of, we don't have much of that this year either, because it's just, and it's worse, and the problem this year, and this is why I say it's like, and I hate to be talking like a Debbie Downer over here, but if you're still listening, you're welcome to being an F1 fan. You're with us now. This is your trial by fire. You have to stick through it. The problem we're having this year is that sort of gap that you're seeing sort of exists almost the entire way through the grid, where it's very clear where Williams are going to be, where Haas are going to be, where Alfa are going to be, Kick Sauber. You can always almost plan it out, and that's worrying. That we didn't have that last year. Last year we did have an interesting little race in the mid pack, and already
but that's stuff I feel like I have more confidence that has potential to scramble throughout the year than I do people.
Yeah,
I'm there
possibly
too,
surrounding Red Bull.
Fair.
So that
Small data
I'm not.
pool.
Yeah, I'm not so scared about that. But yeah, should we move on to the next section here?
Sure, let's do it.
Yeah, so you can send us an email if you like, shift.f1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. Also in the show notes. You can also hit us up on the socials. The link is in the show notes for that. That is us around the internet. Should we take it around the world of racing, Danny?
Let's race around the world. Yeah.
The World Rally Championship is in Croatia.
Ooh.
Starting out of Zagreb. For the
Magical Croatia.
Croatia Rally. Yes, the Red Keep. Speaking of World Superbike, they're at TT Circuit Assen this weekend.
Oh, mein Assen.
Yeah.
Race around, please.
The
Bun
IMSA
some rubber.
The IMSA WeatherTech Championship is at Long Beach for the Acura GP of Long Beach.
I like Long Beach because the beach in my hometown is called, well, the biggest beach is called Tremor, which means Tra means strand or beach, and Moor means big. So Long Beach, big beach, same thing.
Nice.
I'd have been Long Beach.
NASCAR Xfinity Series is at the hallowed grounds of Talladega in Lincoln, AL for the Ag Pro 300.
Ag Pro. I'm an Ag Pro. I'm not an Ag amateur.
The supercars are at Rotokawa, New Zealand at the Taupo International Motorsport Park and Events Center.
That all sounded Japanese. That's in New Zealand.
It's in New Zealand.
Cool.
Let's see what else we got here. IndyCar, also at Long Beach for the Long Beach Grand Prix.
Grand Beach. The Long Prix Grand Beach. Yeah.
Here's your prize. It's a beach. The World Endurance Championship, 6 hours of Imola at Autodromo Enzo Edino Ferrari.
That's a fun one. God, Imola's a tough track to go around for 6 hours. It's pretty, some turns you don't get out of there if you go off.
And we
that was not a. Sorry, I just realized that might have sounded like a very not very pleasant Ayrton Senna reference. I was not saying that. Imola in general has a lot of turns that don't have much runoff or are gravel. So
I thought you lost that book, Danny.
I did. I know. I got rid of the book, so we wouldn't have to have this fucking grimoire that we refer to at the end of every podcast.
Well, anyway, NASCAR's at Talladega for the Geico 500.
I keep throwing it away, but it just turns up on my doorstep again. I don't know what to do.
The Geico lizard brought it back to you.
Exactly, yeah, he did. With some great, bundling home and car, so it was all good.
Formula One's sprint weekend for China kicks off Thursday. All right, I'm gonna go by. These are Eastern times. Okay. I'm gonna go by session, not by day. Free practice 1, Thursday, April 18th at 11:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPNU. Sprint qualifying and the sprint are on the same day, technically, Eastern time. Sprint qualifying, Friday at 3:30 a.m. on ESPN2. The sprint itself is at 11 p.m. on ESPNU. Then we've got qualifying on Saturday at 3 a.m. on ESPN2. And finally, the race Sunday, April 21st at 3 a.m. on ESPN. It's a lot. I'm gonna.
Yeah,
I'll post the visual, the graphic for everyone on the socials.
Fair play.
It's a lot.
It's tricky. Midnight race, I guess, or midnight qualifying anyway. Over here on the west. Man, oh man.
Yeah. Final thoughts ahead of the Chinese Grand Prix, Danny.
Wait, is it Saturday night? It is the race then.
It'll be, yes, for Pacific time, midnight between Saturday and Sunday.
I cannot wait because the Petaluma Speedway, the raceway, has been. It was supposed to start again 3 weeks ago, but we keep having rain at the end of the week, and they had to cancel it. So hopefully this weekend is the weekend they're doing it. We're having our opening race weekend, which is great because that means I can go to the races, stay until the end, come home, watch the Grand Prix. That's a fun Saturday night. I'm looking forward to that.
Nice. Rob, final thoughts?
All this bike talk has got me thinking about one of the coolest, not a documentary things, but like the greatest racing fan vid I've ever seen. And I can't find it, but if anyone has ever seen this.
Okay.
Somebody did like a tribute video cutting together all the different footage from all the different feeds, set to, I want to say, God Moving Over the Face of the Waters, the music from the end of Heat, covering the Rossi Jorge Lorenzo Catalunya 2009 duel.
I have seen it. I have literally seen this.
I can't find it. It is one of the greatest. Like the problem that Hitting the Apex had is that thing was like 90 minutes long and never came close, despite as hard as they worked, to getting it like whatever this one fan had dialed in about like what is compelling about high level cycling. They couldn't get there, and maybe that's just the magic of God Moving Over the Face of the Waters. But that one race, like Catalunya 2009, I'm not a MotoGP guy. I know that race. Yeah. Because like it is one of the iconic like two riders top of their game,
turn by turn overtaking, like knockout.
Yeah.
Oh God, it's so you've activated a memory that I have. I remember that because I remember the commentators are losing their mind as the music is playing. It's like
it was on Vimeo. And my suspicion is it got too big, right? Vimeo, the whole business model is like if some people actually start watching your video, you're fucked. So I imagine
you owe us $2 million because too many people watched your video. It's like the inverse
side of the Vimeo business model. It's like, congratulations, you have a hit video. Now our finance department has some options for you.
Oh my gosh. Fuck yeah! Okay, you gotta. Yeah, I'm sure someone.
I'm putting it out in the world. Somebody, there's a re-upload somewhere of this.
Gotta be.
But like putting out in the world, bring it back to us because the world needs to see if we're all whetting our appetite to become MotoGP fans. As a big push is made to make it an even bigger sport. That is the video. If you want to show somebody like, why is this awesome? Boop. Rossi Lorenzo, Catalunya 2009, Moby.
All right. Well, on that note, if you would like to support the show and get access to all of our bonus episodes, the ad-free version of the podcast, and the official Shift+F1 Discord, you can do so over at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Have a good race weekend, everyone. We will see you all next week.